important when you arrive in those countries. We can look at some of the arrival information. Particularly, I'd like to know and hear from the speakers about quarantine. Is it required? All right. And who's going to pay for the cost? Is the institution paying for it or the students paying for it? And then also some of the speakers have also talked about vaccination and who's going to pay for the vaccinations. All right. So let's start with Canada. Now, I know, and I read it somewhere, that the quarantine measures actually works depending on the category, whether you're vaccinated, not vaccinated, and recovered, isn't it? So there are different policies for that. But before I ask Jessica to speak, am I right to hear from the, correct to say from the three speakers that you need to take a test, the COVID test, 72 hours before departure, isn't it? For all the three countries, right? That's common for all these three countries. So that's something that you have to bear in mind. So I'll pass the session to Jessica to expand on the quarantine, who's paying for it, and also what are the measures for it. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Daryl. So for different, we have different quarantine and testing measures for three different types of international students coming into Canada. So the first one is for fully vaccinated international student coming to Canada. So you still have to do the pre-entry test, the PCR COVID-19 test, which has to be taken 72 hours before your arrival. And then when you get into Canada, you still have to do the upon arrival test, which is at the port of your entry at the airport. You are exempted from the 40-day self-quarantine. You can go directly to the dormitory or anywhere that you have rented before. And then you don't have to take the day 8 test. So for the international students who are eligible for being fully vaccinated traveler, you should have your 2 doses of vaccination from your home country from at least 40 days before your arrival. And those doses should be accepted and should be among the 4 accepted vaccines. So the first one is Pfizer BioNTech, the second one is Moderna, and AstraZeneca, and Johnson & Johnson. So you must keep in mind that only those 4 vaccines are accepted for fully vaccinated international students. And then for the second type of students, the one who are not vaccinated yet, you still have to do the pre-entry test, the arrival test, and the day 8 test. And you also have to do the 14-day self-quarantine, which is mandatory. For the recover students, like the recover from COVID, you must have the proof of positive COVID-19 molecular test, and you still have to do 14-day self-quarantine, but you are exempted from pre-entry day 1 and day 8 tests, so you don't have to do any COVID test when you are in Canada. And especially from September 7th, this is a tentative date. Depending on our vaccination rollout, if we hit 80% of the total population got vaccinated for the first dose, then we are going to welcome foreign tourists into Canada as well, and they must be fully vaccinated. Mm-hmm. For the quarantine costs, so for anyone, international student or travel coming into Canada, if you're doing self-quarantine, you must be responsible for the quarantine cost. And normally the cost would ranging from 700 to 1,000 Canadian dollars for 40 days, including accommodations and foods. We encourage the international students to stay in hotels because they have the room service, so they don't have to arrange the food by themselves. And at University of Windsor or some other institution, they also have partnership with some hotels to get a special rates for international students as well. So you should explore that opportunity before you making a decision to travel to Canada to do self-quarantine. Then with the vaccination of the international student coming to Canada, as long as you're residing in Canada, you are able to get access to free vaccination. We have the mass vaccination sites for the student to book appointment, and then you can go there and get your vaccine dose at Windsor. In Windsor, at University of Windsor, we also offer the student with free transportation from your place to the mass vaccination site. So it's very convenient, and it's the way for us to encourage people to get vaccinated. Also, we have the walk-in and drop-in vaccine clinic. So for this form of vaccination place, the student don't have to book any appointment. You just walk in and get vaccinated. But there are a limited number of doses offered during a day. And at University of Windsor campus, we also have the walk-in vaccine clinic for our students as well.
Thank you. So let's look at UK. Nina, understand the quarantine time duration is about 10 days, but then it depends on which country you're coming from. As you mentioned earlier on, there are the different lanes and so on. And in terms of the quarantine, I guess the good thing about UK is that some of the universities actually pay for the quarantine, isn't it? Some universities, but some of them don't. And for the vaccination, I understand also that because it's part of the health cover, so they all get free vaccination. But Nina, let's expand on this for the audience. Thank you.
Sure. It's a pleasure, Daryl. Now, in terms of the quarantine period in the UK, allow me to share as well. The UK has started to slowly ease restrictions since 19th of July 2021. How students or travelers are quarantined upon arrival in England depends on the traffic light system, in which countries are placed in a color bracket depending on their risk. Red countries are high risk, amber are moderate risk, and green are low risk. Depending on which country you are coming from, you will need to do different things. So since the travel guidance policy changes ever so frequently, I've got to really be careful. So I'm just going to put a disclaimer note here. As of today, and in reference to Southeast Asia regions, the red list countries are Indonesia, Philippines, Myanmar. Amber list countries as of today are Malaysia, Thailand, China. Green list countries as of today are Singapore, Brunei, Hong Kong. Red and amber list countries are required to quarantine for 10 days upon arrival in the UK. However, for students arriving from red list countries, such as Indonesia, Philippines, and Myanmar, for example, they must quarantine for 10 days in a government-managed quarantine hotel in the UK before traveling to their designated universities. Okay, if you have not arranged a quarantine package prior to your arrival in England, you will face a heavy penalty of up to £4,000 and will still have to pay for your quarantine package on arrival. So students, please do pay attention to this. So when you arrive, if you are coming from Indonesia, Philippines, you are required to quarantine in managed quarantine hotel, and you can only arrive in England at certain ports of entry. Currently, these are Heathrow Airport, Gatwick Airport, London City Airport, Birmingham Airport. Mostly it's in London or Birmingham. Other ports of entry may be added in the future. How much do I need to pay if I need to be quarantined in the UK if I come from a red list country? Per student, you are required to stay for 10 days, quarantine for 10 days, and that equates to £1,750 per student or per traveler. That includes your accommodation, your hotel your quarantine managed accommodation, and also it's basically full bedding, including food as well. For students arriving from the amber list countries, such as Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam, they too are required to quarantine for 10 days upon arrival in the UK. The only difference between red and amber lists is that students from the amber countries will not be required to quarantine in the government-managed quarantine hotels upon arrival. They could make their onward journey to their respective universities and quarantine in their own accommodation, meaning it can be university-managed accommodation, private accommodation, or nearby hotels.
Nina, what happens if a student has been vaccinated? Do they still need to go to quarantine?
Yes, they do. Presently, Daryl, although there have been a lot of statements coming out saying that if you've got your double doses and if it's regulated by the UK vaccines in terms of the recognized vaccine list, at this point of time, international students are still required to quarantine upon arrival in the UK.
I see. Okay. Suman, what's the situation in Singapore for quarantine and who's bearing the cost, and what about the vaccination? Could you expand for us?
Thanks, Daryl. So for Singapore, I mean, after 23rd June, so 2021, it has categorized, I mean, two manners. One is high-risk countries and one is low-risk countries. And from a high-risk countries such as India or Sri Lanka or Pakistan or Nepal, Bhutan, from these countries, when students arrives here, they have only couple of things. One is they have to take a PCR test from the home country. That's the first one, and that is prior to onboarding the flight, 72 hours prior to onboarding the flight. And after coming to Singapore, so they will be tested they will be tested in the airport. So from there, they will be quarantined for 14 days. And the quarantine fees is about $2,125 for 14 days quarantine. And everyone will be going through the 8th day of the quarantine serology test. And after that, they will be connected to the community in Singapore. And we also encourage in the quarantine period for the students, we also connect this with the students in multiple manners to facilitate in easing the quarantine, what they are going through.
Mm-hmm. And vaccination, that's also provided free of charge for students?
Unfortunately, the students need to bear the charge. But above 14 days, if there is any additional days quarantine, then James Cook University will jump in, and we will accommodate the 1 week cost if there is an additional to 14 days. That is something it's occurring.
That's good to know. Yeah. So I think hearing from the three speakers, it seems that almost all the three countries have about coming to 60% of the population being vaccinated, which means that for every 3 person you meet, 2 of them have already been vaccinated. So I think that gives you some level of safety there. And I think all this information are very useful, you know.